This season of grief has made us realize what we most value, what is truly important to us. Foremost of these, besides survival, is our relationships and our families. The loss of friends and family, the longing to be in community, whether in church or at the office, the desire to be with family who are dying, who are in hospitals, and we have no access to them, or have at least the usual rituals of mourning and be able to say farewell to our loved ones, and not being able to do so. These losses make us aware of how precious our family and our friends really are. To be sure, there are regrets, things we feel we could have done better, things we feel we were amiss in doing good things to our neighbors, our friends, and our family. Kahit na po tayo na mga nag-alaga ng ating mga may sakit. I remember when my mother was sick and dying, and I felt very privileged to have accompanied her until the end. And yet, at the end of it, I was feeling, what could I have done better? Mahirap, and it was hard to see how much sacrifice it really entails to tend the sick and the dying. And yet, at the same time, we also always feel some regret that we could have done something better. In many families these days, because we are cooped up together, there is also increasing tension and irritation, because it is not easy to be suddenly thrown together 24/7 without space or occupation to give us relief from the presence of one another. I have a businessman friend who said to me, I love my wife very much, but I could not bear the thought that we will be together 24/7, he said. My friends in Africa tell me that on top of the hardships, there is a silent pandemic going on. And that is the dramatic increase in domestic violence and child abuse among families. Now, it is possible this is also happening to us. It's happening among families in this country. So, how are we to cope with the grief and the loss? How can we be families again when the homes are broken, when the father or mother is gone, and we feel orphaned? How do we deal with the wounds of childhood and all the bad things that we have experienced with our families? Now, our passage today tells us how to be strong families so that we are able to cope together with the grief of losing not just our loved ones, but also the memories and the world that we used to share with them. In Ephesians, we see that the first thing that we probably need to really do for all of us is mutual submission in our relationships. In Ephesians 5:18-33, it is a text that people say belongs to what Martin Luther has called household rules. In other words, our conduct within families, within households. Ang German dito ay Haustafel, no? For those who belong to the household of God. This text is usually used for weddings and usually begins with verse 22. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. But it is now known by scholars that this call for submission is actually for all of us who are children of light, not just wives. Verses 18 to 24, we are told, is actually one long sentence in the original Greek. And the word submit is part of the general command to walk in the Spirit and reverence Christ by submitting to one another. I would like to quote Max Turner in the New Bible Commentary. He says, the verb submit, supplied in most translations of verse 22, actually has no equivalent in Paul's Greek, but is understood from its appearance in the dependent participle clause, submitting to one another in verse 21. Note that submission here is as to the Lord. Submission to the husband is not creational, but Christological. As the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Likewise, husbands are to love their wives, as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Now, part of this loving is a kind of nurture, a kind of care that enables the wife to grow without blemish. We are told that psychologically, women are wired in such a way that they will do anything to be loved. Kaya po yung karamihan mga babae, ang kanilang sumumbonong sa buhay ay mag-asawa and be in a relationship. Even if at the end of it, binububog sila. At the same time, men are said to be sensitive to anything that tends to disrespect or demean them as heads of households. Marami pong mga nasa laylayan ng lipunan na yung mga kababaihan dahil sa microfinance, lumalaki yung kanilang income, nagkakaroon ng business, nagiging independent. Ang impact sa mga kalalakihan is they felt diminished. And so they take it out on their wives. I sit in the board of a microfinance organization. And it was noticed that after 4 or 5 loan cycles, the women are beginning to falter. Nagpi-fail na po ang business. And when I ask why, ang sabi, it's because they do not get any help from the husband. Instead, they also expect them na magluto pa, with all the other pressures and burdens that they have. Kailangan din mag-function din sila as housekeeping or as housekeepers. Now, ito po ay sapagkat nagkakaroon po ng sense of less significance. Kakaroon ng dysfunction ng mga kalalakihan kapag sila po ay walang masyadong income at nagiging dominant yung female na partner. Kaya ang mga kababaihan, importante na we respect our husbands. Kasi yun po ang napakalaki psychologically na kailangan nila. Ang mga lalaki naman, kailangan mahalin ang kanilang mga asawa. Yun po ang siguro result ng fall, no? Yun daw pong mga kababaihan were punished in the area that they are most vulnerable. Yun pong relationships. So that sabi niya, your desire shall be for your husband. Ang kapalit nun, he shall rule over you. Yun naman pong mga kalalakihan because si Adam surrendered yung kanyang dun sa hierarchy ng social order, he surrendered his male headship. So sabi, itong mga kalalakihan kahit na uh, wala silang, kumbaga, K, no? Minsan, wawala ng K to be heads of households. Ina-assert pa rin nila yon at pag hindi, binubugbog ang kanilang mga asawa. Ito po ay resulta ng what I think was the judgment that was meted out to men and women as a result of the fall. Kaya kailangan mahalin natin ang ating mga asawa kung tayo ay mga husbands. At the same time, yung mga kababaihan naman, see to it that you respect your husbands. Kahit na house husband na sila. In other words, walang masyadong kita. Now, yung susunod dito, apart from mutual submission, no, sinasabi na ito po ay mutual submission of children of light. Kaya babae tayo, kaya lalaki tayo, lahat tayo are called to mutual submission. At hindi lamang po yun. Sabi, we are called to respect and honor one another. Sa chapter 6, makikita po natin mayroong injunction doon sa mga fathers at mga children. Now, some commentators say, yung mga house rules na to overturn the existing social order of that time. It is revolutionary to tell husbands to love their wives because they are usually viewed by Greco-Roman culture as good only for bearing children. Most of these Greek or Roman males tend to reserve the most tender affection not so much to their wives, but to their male friends and lovers. It is also a new thing in that culture to tell fathers to not be hard on their children. Noong pong mga panahon na yon, pagka hindi mo gusto yung anak mo, pwede mong ipatapon sa mga mountains, no? Expose them into the hills. Pero ngayon, dito sabi ni Pablo, within that social order, that hierarchy, fathers, even if they have authority, should not provoke their children to anger. No? They are not to be hard on them, but instead to teach them what is right. Now, while it is true that there is a liberative dimension doon sa sinasabi ni Pablo sa bawat yung wives and husbands, children, parents, the fact is that the social order remains. No? It looks like in the context of Paul's teaching here, he simply brings new rules within this social hierarchy. Hindi po binubuwag yung hierarchy na yun. Children are to obey parents still and honor them if they want to prosper in their life. Sabi, this is the first promise, the first commandment with a promise. And fathers, on the other hand, even if they retain being authoritative, they remain as authoritative figures. They are to respect also their children and not to provoke their children to anger, meaning not giving them cause for bitter resentment. Marami pong mga kabataan lumalaki. Maraming grudges at resentment sa kanilang ama o sa ina. Yun nga lang, dahil hindi sila makalaban, no? Dahil dependent sila sa mga magulang. Sa paglaki nila, they carry itong bitterness nito. And that's why sabi, you are not to provoke your children to anger. Yung walang kinikim-kim, no? Nasama ng loob at galit. Fathers have the primary responsibility for discipline and instruction, sabi rito. Not the mother. Usually po sa ating mga families ngayon, lalo na dahil maraming OFW, wala yung kalalakihan, wala yung kababaihan, walang teaching and instruction ang mga bata. Paano sila lalaki. No? At wala rin disiplina. So, dapat maisip natin na ito po ay primary responsibility ng fathers. Usually, yung mga fathers natin are passive. Pinababayaan yung mga nanay. Kaya meron pong dyan sa mga silang communities, maraming mga women who say, kami po ay mga natay. Sabi ko, ano ibig sabihin ng natay? Nanay at tatay. Kaya kami po ay mga nanay at tatay. Kasi wala po yung mga kalalakihan namin o kung nandiyan man, ay wala naman silang kwenta, wala naman mga kita. So, hindi po dapat ganito. Yung fathers should remain as people who care for their wives, care for their families, no? Sabi, you should love your wife and especially your family as Christ loved the church. You have to nurture them. You have to care for them. At you have to discipline them and teach them if you are fathers. Huwag asahan lang sa nanay. Now, the other element na importante sa mga relationships natin within the family is you leave father and mother. Makikita po natin ito sa Genesis chapter 2:24. Sabi, a man leaves his father and mother and he is joined to his wife. And si Pablo quotes this all over again in his discussion here in Ephesians 4. Now, we all grow up physically and emotionally dependent on our parents. Yung mga sanggol, pag hindi mo alagaan, hindi mo pakainin, no? Mamamatay. So, we are physically dependent. At hindi lang yun, we are emotionally dependent. Meron tinatawag yung mga psychologists. Ito yung stage ng object relationship, no? Object identification, dun sa mga significant adults in our lives. Now, as we grow into adulthood, we are less and less dependent on our parents for sustenance. Nakakatayo na sa dalawang paa. But some continue to depend on parents for approval and emotional growth. Now, part of what it means to leave father and mother, sabi po ni Henry Nouwen, ang Catholic na psychologist, leaving father and mother means that we grow up in such a way that we are no longer dependent on our parents, either for financial support or emotional support. This is what independence means. Marami pong mga kabataan gusto nila independent sila, and yet financially and emotionally they continue to be so bound to their parents. Some of us get stunted in our growth psychologically and emotionally. Marami pong mga successful men and women in their careers. But however successful they may become, many are still always longing for the approval that they did not get when they were children. Always at the back of their minds is still wanting yung approval ng kanilang mga parents. Because the truth is, the opinion that matters most to us is the opinion of our parents, especially when we were young. And if we do not get it, we will try our very best to still get that kind of approval even after they are dead. Now, in later years, our roles get reversed. The parents grow more and more dependent on us for their physical needs. Now, those with issues against their parents tend to get reluctant in providing for them. Now, it is possible that some of us remember the neglect or abuse that we suffered in the hands of our parents when we were children. Those with issues against their parents tend to get reluctant in providing for them. They remember their own neglect or abuse suffered in the hands of their parents when they were children. But because we are children of light, hindi lang tayo children ng mga magulang natin. We are children of light. We are to honor parents and provide for them no matter their imperfections or the things that they did or did not do. Yung mga failures nila and so on. As Paul admonished us, I quote, "Put on them as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another. And if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony." No matter how wounded we can be in our families, at totoo rin naman po na sa isang pamilya, talagang mag-aaway. Mayroong alitan talaga. And it is a mystery that even if we all grow up in the same family, yung mga children can be very, very different in temperament and so on, at talagang mag-aaway. And we will wound each other. Now, sabi ni Pablo, you bear with one another. Dahil all of us are imperfect, no? And if you have a complaint, sabihin mo. At hindi lang yun, forgive. Now, in our culture, this is very difficult. We don't know how to give negative feedback properly. Ang nangyayari, nilalagay na lang natin sa ating loob, no? Mukhang peace, pero kumukulo ang ating loob. At kinikimkim natin yan hanggang tayo ay lumaki. So, meron tayong cold war sa pamilya. O kaya, magdadabog tayo, makukulong sa silid, hindi nakakausapin kung sino, kahit na nasa pamilya tayo. Sabi ni Pablo, you bear with one another, support, and most of all, forgive. Mahirap po ito. Pero ito po ang sabi sa atin. We must learn to forgive. Why? Because God Himself has forgiven you. At sabi nga, love covers a multitude of sins. No? Gaano karami man ang atraso sa atin ng ating mga pamilya, love covers a multitude of sins. We allow the love of Christ to cover this multitude of sins. Why? Because all of us, we fail. And we wound others because of what we are. We are fallen creatures who wish we could have loved our parents better. Or our brothers and sisters better. Pag namatay sila, it is too late when we lose those who have been significant in our lives. Those that we fail to serve and honor while they are alive. Ano po ang implikasyon nito sa ating buhay bilang simbahan at bilang mga pamilya? I just want to give a short keepsake for the journey. These days, I have been listening to stories, to lots of tributes for family and friends who have died. Marami pong mga memorial services na ginagawa ng mga simbahan, including DBC, for all the friends, members, families that we have lost. And as I listen to stories of what our loved ones have been, it is clear to me that what matters in the end is not what we have accomplished, Not how much fame, how much money we have accumulated through the years. What matters is the nature of our relationships with one another. And that is what people do not forget. I have been reading a book on the doctrine of the Trinity by Daryl Johnson. Now, he tells us this insight that at the center of the universe is relationship. There is the love of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit for one another. Now, this pandemic has shown us what we most miss: the love and community that is supplied by our family and our friends. And in our grief, we realize the vast emptiness that they have left in our lives. As the Russian poet Yevtushenko once said, it is not people who die, but the worlds in them. And again, I make my lament against destruction. This is why we never really get over the grief. Because again and again, through circumstances in our lives, we are reminded of the world that we have lived and shared together with someone who is now no more. I remember my mother when my father died. Sabi niya, the hardest part was after the funeral. When everyone is gone, yung mga nakikiramay, wala na po, hindi ka na busy sa mga funeral arrangements, and you are left alone. At dun daw sa bahay, whenever she sits down for breakfast, makikita niya yung chair ng aking ama na kabisera, and it is empty. And she says, every day for many months, she would cry when she sees this empty chair. Kaya po yung mga nabubiyuda o mga nawawalan ng mga asawa, it's important for you to sit in the chair that your husband or wife used to occupy, or to sleep in that side of the bed that they used to occupy, para hindi mo nakikita itong empty space. And my mother says she would always cry when she realizes this chair is empty. So we live with this vast emptiness whenever we are reminded of the life that we shared together. Now, this is why the promise of the resurrection is so precious. Because we are told that there will come a time when we shall see our family, our friends, people that we miss most, once again, welcoming us. And there will be this very grand reunion in this great banquet that God has prepared for all of us. For us, death is not really dying. It is waking up to a great and joyous morning, resurrection time.